Monsters and Purpose, a short story by Josh Jameson. That's me. You never know what kind of monsters lurk in the world around us. At least, that is my philosophy. My name is Enoch. In the many, many years that I have traveled the world, and most recently the highways of the United States, I have seen all kinds. I have traveled for years, hitchhiking and traveling with others. You tend to see parts of the world that others wouldn't even know exist traveling this way, meaning people who live a life that normal folk could not even contemplate. That I have met so many of these monsters is a testament to the hidden depravity that is in the very spirit of mankind. This is not always the case, of course. Sometimes you meet the most wonderful people. People like Stan, who I met in New York many years ago, who I send postcards to every October. While exploring the southern states recently, I had the most extraordinary luck of meeting a woman who had a mentality much like my own. Over a brief span, we had a relationship that resulted in a young boy. Sadly, the woman could not handle the strains of childbirth. After a short mourning period, and as soon as the young boy could travel safely, I resumed my journey across the country. I named the boy Phil, and now he craves the travel as much as I do. Even though he is merely 4 years of age, he is a remarkable young man and grows more and more each day. The insights he gleans from the world rival even my own. He takes great pride in that ability, often pointing us in a direction that leads to purposes even I had not seen. Some who meet him wonder if he has some form of mental disability, though I do not see it that way. I found over the last few years that more people will pick up a hitchhiker when the one holding their thumb out is a child. So we receive more rides than I ever received in my years of travel. I honestly wonder how I had not had a child sooner. I have concluded that I simply did not desire one. When I met that wonderful woman, I connected in a way that let my guard down for the first time in what felt like forever. I will cherish the time with her always. I often tell young Phil of his mother. The boy, though, is one of few words. Though one thing he had no trouble telling me of is when he was hungry. So as I looked down at Phil beside me, his thumb extended beyond the edge of the road, a road that he himself had led us down the previous day, a genuine smile forms on my lips. Phil looks at me and says, "I am hungry." Simple words, but I know what he means. I too am hungry, though I imagine it is not the same for him and I. I look around and see a sign for an IHOP, the giant photograph of a big stack of pancakes piled high, which makes my mouth water. So I look at Phil and I say, "Me too, boy. Me too." As we march endlessly down the road, surrounded by dense forest and hills on all sides, I sense young Phil grow restless next to me. I know what that means. There must be a traveler growing closer who may pick us up. So I stop walking, and Phil follows my lead, a smile on his face. A large, well-worn SUV slowly passes us, and I lock eyes with the driver. A man with a warm smile on his face looks back at me, and I know we have found the transportation we require. Even though Phil and I walked for days with no ride before, sometimes transportation just was a necessary part of the journey. The SUV, a late 90s model Ford Explorer with obvious rust spots spreading across its side, pulls to the side of the little highway some 20 feet in front of us. I look at Phil beside me, and he smiles back awkwardly. Phil and I hurry to the side of the SUV where the man is waiting with the passenger side window rolled down. I look inside and say, "Good morning. I appreciate you stopping for us." The man, with a thick southern accent, says to me, "Oh man, I've been in your shoes. I just hope that someone would do the same for me. Where y'all headed?" I smile back at the man and I tell him, "East. We are trying to make it to the hotel down the road with the IHOP." That billboard back there has my mouth watering. The man looks ahead, as if contemplating if he was headed east for a long moment, then turns back to me and says, I can get you there, no problem, man. Y'all climbing back there, and we'll get you there ASAP. I simply smile at the man, excited that we will both be eating soon, and say, Much appreciated, sir. I look around once more at our surroundings. The deep smell of earth, trees, and nature fills my nostrils. I open the door for Phil, who climbs in first, nimbly sliding across the back seat of the SUV to the opposite side, so I can climb in behind him. We have very few possessions, only carrying what we can in a backpack strapped to each of our backs. So we both place our backpacks between our legs on the floorboard of the back seat of the vehicle, like we have done so many times before. Once inside, I close the door. The man looks back and says, Name's Steve. How about you? I look back at the man, a polite smile on my face, and say, Enoch. And this is Phil, gesturing towards the boy beside me. Steve says, Well, nice to meet you fellas. Let's get rolling, huh? He then puts the vehicle back into drive and rolls out onto the highway once more. As he brings the vehicle up to speed, he asks, So where are y'all headed in the long run? Headed out to some family or something? I look out the window, watching the thick forest beyond the highway quickly rolling by. No family pretty much anywhere these days. Just me and Phil here, traveling the country. Eventually, we will move on and travel outside of the country. But first, we want to see what else the US holds for us. Phil nods beside me, staring out of the vehicle on his side. He enjoys the forest and generally anywhere untouched by the greed of men. Someday, he will understand that there is beauty in both man-made structures and the raging wilds. He will have to witness more good, though, for that battle to be won. Steve whistles and says, Oh boy, that must be awesome. No connections, no rules, no destination in mind. That's gotta be the dream. His eyes flicking back and forth from the road to his rearview mirror, eyeing both myself and Phil, the smile never leaving his face. I reply to him, Well, it's like we were made for it, you know? Just traveling, seeing what the world has to offer. Steve nods slowly in the front seat. I can see his face in the rear view as well as he can see my own, though I wonder if he realizes that fact. The smile grew even more as we drove in silence for a few minutes. I asked Steve, The sign back there said 20 miles. That sound about right? Steve looks back once more and says, Yes, sir. Though these winding two-lane highways tend to take a little longer than the turnpike. Why would y'all take this route anyhow? Seems like a weird choice to go off the main road. I looked at Phil and back at Steve in the rear view and say, Well, I let Phil here pick the route more often than not. Over the years, I have traveled wherever I want. Not to mention, Phil seems to have a sixth sense for picking the most interesting routes across the country. Steve laughed and said, Well, that's gotta be it then, 'cause out here you almost never see traffic. A few dozen cars even on a busy day. I reply with a smile on my face. That doesn't bother us. Walk, drive, ride. We get to where we should be one way or the other. It just always worked that way for us. Steve smiles again as he drove on. A few minutes later, as Phil and I patiently watch the scenery roll by out each side of the car, I feel the vehicle decelerating and veering towards the right. I look forward, and the smile has left Steve's face. I ask him, Everything all right, Steve? Steve seemed to jar out of some kind of trance, and the smile returns to his face. He looked back and says, Y'all don't mind if I swing by my place real quick, do you? I just gotta grab something, then we'll be on our way again. Shouldn't take but a few minutes tops. I look at Steve in the eyes, and I could tell that something was off. Though, I really don't have any reason to disagree. We are in no hurry. We have no actual destination. other than the fact that my mouth is still watering, imagining the sweet indulgence of IHOP pancakes. So I tell him, "No, sir. I do not think we have any issue with that. Do you, Phil?" I look at him next to me, and he just nods absently, never turning his gaze from the forest. Steve says, "Much obliged," and turns onto a little dirt road that leads beyond the tree line. After a few hundred feet beyond the tree line, we come to a dilapidated old fence with a gate wired shut. Steve throws the vehicle into park and says, "I'll be right back," and jumps out of the vehicle, jogging towards the gate. I look at Phil, once more asking, "Everything okay, Phil?" Concerned that the change of plans suddenly would upset him. Changes to plans or deviation from his planned path could sometimes make him uneasy, or worse, throw a tantrum. I know, though, that he cannot help it, so I just do my best to avoid it. Phil just nods next to me, though, no apparent change to his demeanor. I smile and look forward once more. Steve is running back to the vehicle. The gate was wide open. He jumps back in and says, "I can't let the wild stock get out. I'm sure you understand," as he moves the vehicle just beyond the open gate. He looks back at me, and I just nod, saying, "Oh, yes, sir. I understand." So Steve jumps out, jogging back to the gate and closing it once more. He wires it back shut and returns to the SUV, smiling. With the door wide open, the smell of the forest all around us is unmistakable. Wet earth, fresh wind, and a slight stink of pollution from the dilapidated SUV hiding just behind the more pleasant odors. Steve jumps back into the vehicle once more, and I notice Phil is now staring intently in Steve's general direction, as if he can see the man through the back of the seat of the car. As Steve climbs back in, I notice that something was now in his hands, where there was nothing a moment ago as he climbed out of the vehicle. His smile is obnoxiously large as he points a gun at my chest. I look into his eyes and know instantly that he means business. I am anxious for Phil, so I dare not make a move. Steve says to me, "Don't you make a move, mister. We're just gonna move down the road here a bit to my cabin. So don't you do anything stupid, okay?" I just nod my head, the situation causing my chest to pound. It's a rare feeling these days, so I'm surprised. Ever since Phil was born, I can't help but be more concerned than I used to be. Caring for another changes oneself. Steve drives down the bumpy road, the vehicle leaning left and right as it travels the obviously rarely traveled track towards a structure in the distance. I look at Phil, and his gaze has not faltered. No apparent change in his feelings towards the situation, but that does not surprise me. Rarely does he genuinely emote. I often wonder if he will ever learn the art of emotion. I realize my mind wandered as the vehicle grinds to a halt, the gun never pointing away from my chest. Clearly, the man thinks I am the greater threat, which pleases me. While I am never a fan of being in harm's way, I still do not know how young Phil would react, much less if anything would cause the gun to go off prematurely. After years of being alone, the thought of losing a loved one seems to be a pain that I could not contemplate completely. After a moment, Steve finally speaks up. He says to me, "Okay, mister, open your door slowly. Don't do anything stupid. You hear?" I nod, slowly reaching my hand out and grasping the handle. As I do so, Steve says to Phil, "Boy, don't you move neither. I got plans for you." I grimace as the smile returns to his face, and I now understand the looks he was giving Phil and I. It wasn't a friendly smile after all. It will never fail to frustrate me that I do not understand emotion better. That must be where Phil gets it. Moments like this make me understand all too well that maybe I just was not designed like others. I just didn't understand emotions and feelings the way others did. In retrospect, that is likely why Phil is the way he is. Even now, no emotion was showing on the young one's face. The sinister look in Steve's eyes gleamed, and I could feel my insides churn. This man, this apparent Good Samaritan, in fact was a true charlatan. The anger within me built slowly but surely. Anger, for some reason, was the one emotion that came naturally to me. It didn't make me feel good necessarily, but it did make me feel, and feeling felt good. So the rare emotion brought a smile to my face. Steve, apparently annoyed with my smile, raises his voice suddenly. Boy, don't you get any wild ideas. Wipe that damn smile off your face. It's creepy. Get your ass out of the car now. He wildly gestures his gun, rushing me out of the vehicle. I slowly open the door, remembering his command to not make any sudden movements. I slowly stick my leg out of the vehicle, beginning to exit as instructed. Steve yells once more. Boy, don't you be a smartass. I told you to move. I look back at Steve, confusion on my face, and say, You said to not make any sudden movements as well. Which command would you like me to follow? Steve's face contorts in rage at the comment, and he screams, Just get your ass out of my truck. He pulls the hammer of the gun back as he screams, expressing his frustration with me. As I climb out more rapidly, I stand next to the vehicle as instructed, arms raised at my sides like I had seen in so many television shows over the years. The intense odors of the earth are even more intense outside of the vehicle. The ground was moist and fertile, the air fresh and clean, but an unmistakable scent of rot lay beneath it all. I look back at Phil, his gaze still never faltering from Steve. I think the boy's focus is truly impressive. My attention came back to Steve as he speaks. Oh, don't you worry about Phil here. I ain't gonna be killing him anytime soon. I can't say he won't hurt none, but I can tell you I won't let him die no time soon. The gleam in his eye is unnatural to say the least. I could never understand why some men felt the need to exert their power over children in such a heinous way. As I stare back at him, the anger delicious in my chest, I smile and say, Are you a church-going man, Steve? Steve laughs loudly and says, Man, when I was growing up, Grandma wouldn't let me skip a single Sunday. Didn't do much good in the long run, though, huh? He laughs maniacally. Then he looks at me straight in the eye, and the smile slowly leaves his face. He said after a long moment, I guess the idea of hell just never scared me much. Hard to be scared of something you don't believe in. I bet you were hoping that I might see the error of my ways or something, huh? I smile back coldly. Oh, no, sir. I understand who you are, though the concept of hell, for you, sir, you cannot escape. The smile leaves Steve's face for just a moment, as if he was considering his actions for the first time in his life. Then the smile returns. I start to speak, but the explosive sound of the gun in his hands drowns out my words. The sound of the gunshot in the confined space causes a concussive force, almost physical, which causes Steve and me to close our eyes at the same instant. The crushing force of a bullet smashing against my chest is nearly instantaneous. I fall backwards, not fully prepared for the shot. Even until the last moment, I tried to have faith in the man. As I land, I feel the crunching ground around me. The leaves and sticks poke into my back and tear my shirt. The cracking sound reverberates in my ears for just a moment until the silence consumes the world around me. I can see the treetops and the blue sky beyond. I had often wondered what it would be like in the last moments of my existence, often looking into the blue sky above and yearned to know what the afterlife contained for man. So I closed my eyes, content to know peace. After a moment, though, I know that once more I would not yet know peace. The sudden force of the bullet still stings against my chest, but as I reach up to my chest, running my fingers through the hole it had created in my shirt, all I feel underneath is the chiseled flesh that Father had bestowed upon me and my siblings. I sit up, not fully disappointed with the result of the gunshot, but the yearning to return home would never abandon me. I know that someday I will be allowed to return home, but after millennia of traveling the earth, I know not why it still surprises me that I have yet to return. His plans must continue to include my wrath. As I sit up completely, I look into the vehicle once more at Steve, whose face is contorted in surprise and fear. His mouth is open wide as if screaming, and his eyes streaming with tears. I look at the gun, which is still pointed at me, and notice the smoke roiling out of the barrel. The scents now assaulting my nose are more poignant than ever. The smell of sulfur, copper, and urine are intense. That was a large caliber to fire one-handed. He was lucky that his wrist didn't snap under the pressure. He must have used it many times to grow such an immunity. Not that it mattered. I looked towards Steve's chest, where Phil's tiny hand is grasping the man's heart. I am quietly impressed that he was able to reach that far. I look towards the back seat at my boy and can see that he is pressed all the way up against the seat, his arm having plunged through the seat, through Steve, and pushing out of his chest, grasping his goal, the man's black heart. Steve looks down at his own heart, still vibrating from being ripped from its home in his chest. The fear was rolling off of him in waves now. For some reason, I could feel fear on a human like wind on a stormy day. Steve looks as if he was going to scream, but could not. Once the life leaves a human, their voice is forever silenced. That was a part of my role that I was forever grateful for. Being my father's physical form of retribution here on Earth led to a lot of circumstances where a person may be screaming. That would just slow the process. So the second genuine smile of today grew on my face. Steve looks back at me as he realizes he can make no sounds, but finding himself able to move even though he was just staring at his own heart. The confusion on his face is profound. That was something that I never grew tiresome of. I look back at Phil, whose hand is still grasping Steve's heart, and say to him, "Phil, you may proceed." Phil smiles and rips his arm back through the man's chest and seat, pulling the heart to his own chest, cradling it like a child would hold a prized toy. Phil immediately jumps out of the vehicle, more nimble than any human child could dream, moving quickly to stand by my side. I place my hand on his shoulder and simply say, "Good boy." Steve is staring at us, the gun having fallen out of his now barely movable appendage, with confusion and terror evident on his face. I take a moment to enjoy the fear, and then say to Phil, "You may eat now, son." The boy wastes no time, immediately greedily biting into the still warm heart in his hands. The fear from Steve redoubled as he watched his own heart being consumed in front of him, a thing that no human could imagine was possible. The confusion and fear continued to confuse him. As Phil had his meal, I take the opportunity to begin my own job and say, "Steve, I gave you the opportunity to repent. Sadly, you chose incorrectly. Let me introduce myself, sir." I bow stiffly as my son continues to chew next to me. As I stand, I continue. "My name is Enoch. You may know me from your Bible as a child. I have gone by many names, but Angel of the Lord is used more often than not. My existence and purpose bestowed upon me by my Father is simply retribution. This is why we are here today." I gesture down at my son and say, "This is Phil. He is what your Bible would call Nephilim, though the translated versions over the last 2,000 years have greatly misconstrued their purpose. They are rare and wondrous things, having abilities that even us angels lack, like the ability to know where to be. I used to spend untold decades tracking down those who needed my talents." I look down at my son, my Nephilim, and say, I often wonder if Father planned these wondrous beings as helpers and companions for us. Though, who am I to know God's will? I look back, the expression on Steve's face even more contorted than before. I continue. See, one of the wonderful things about our existence is that humans, like you, the most heinous of humans, we get to bring to justice ourselves. We have seen atrocities that have gone untold. We have seen entire civilizations lost to time come and go. The all too human hatred causes you to destroy each other time and time again. I shake my head. Genuine remorse crosses my face and mind. Though, for those who manage to escape earthly punishment, we find you. Now, with the assistance of my offspring, all that much easier. I gesture around us. Even I would have taken too long to find this place. I must confess, this was an all too clever den of evil, sir. Though your dark heart was like a beacon to Phil here. I once more gestured to Phil, who was nearly finished consuming the dark heart in his hands. Stephen, our ability to allow you to remain on this earthly plane lasts until I feel your retribution is complete, until I have administered justice for your crimes. The longest time I have spent with a human in the place you now find yourself was merely a century. I can feel Stephen's fear doubling with every word I speak. It is a singularly human ability to think they know fear, only to be proven wrong time and time again. Fear is ever compounding, ever growing. Death or faith is the only release from fear. And for one immune to death while in my presence, well, they do not have the luxury that other mortals are given. Fear is unending for them. I gesture all around us and say, and in this place of evil, where so many young boys have met their end at the hands of your depravity, well, I will tell you, now that I have a son of my own, I gesture towards Phil, who is wiping his hands on his shirt in an attempt to clean himself of Steve's filth. I silently thank my father for the purpose bestowed upon me, then continue once looking back at Steve. Well, Steve, I just hope that we set a new record.